It's a really fascinating phenomenon in human psychology, how quickly we can just mistake the uniform for the job.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you can put on the pristine white doctor's coat, you can drape the stethoscope around your neck and, stride down a hospital corridor carrying a clipboard with this expression of intense focus.
Right. You look the part perfectly.
Exactly. To anyone passing by, you are a physician. But looking the part does not mean you actually possess the knowledge to heal a human body. I mean, when a major artery is severed and an actual emergency unfolds in front of you, the clipboard and the coat, they aren't going to save a life.
Yeah. The human brain relies really heavily on heuristics, like mental shortcuts, to navigate the world. We see the coat, we just assume the competence.
Right.
So we are incredibly susceptible to adopting the superficial form of a role while entirely losing the substantive essence of what that role actually demands.
And that tension, that widening gap between performing an identity and actually living out its essence, that is the central focus of our deep dive today.
It's a really compelling topic.
It really is. Today's source material is this highly reflective piece of writing titled The False Security of Modern Faith and Divine Truth. And the mission of this deep dive is to explore how the author uses a hyper-modern tool, artificial intelligence, alongside ancient scripture, to diagnose what they perceive as a massive crisis in modern religious identity.
Yeah, seeing the latest predictive text algorithms deployed as a diagnostic tool for an ancient spiritual malady, it's a genuinely novel approach to comparative theology.
It really is. But before we go any further, I do want to set the parameters for you, the listener, regarding our approach to this material today.
Always important.
Right. So our source deeply explores the author's specific theological critiques and their interpretations of Islamic texts. We are not here to endorse these religious viewpoints, nor are we, validating these specific critiques.
Right. Our goal is to remain strictly impartial here.
Exactly. We are just unpacking the fascinating arguments the author has laid out, examining the underlying psychological logic they use, and presenting those insights for you to evaluate.
Because the underlying psychological and sociological patterns the author is trying to diagnose, they stretch far beyond any single religious framework.
Completely. Whether you are deeply religious, consider yourself spiritual, or approach the world from a totally secular perspective, this deep dive offers a look at a universal human vulnerability.
We all hold identities we claim to value.
We do. And the question is, how often does the exhausting checklist of proving that identity to the outside world overwrite the actual reason we adopted the identity in the first place?
That's the real question.
So to get to the bottom of this, the author decides to start by asking an AI a deceptively simple question, which is, who is a Muslim?
And to understand the author's angle here, we really need to establish the premise of how current artificial intelligence actually operates.
Right, the mechanics of it.
Yeah, the author rightly points out that AI is essentially a sociological mirror. It just reflects the statistical majority opinion of its training data.
So whatever we put in is what we get out.
Exactly. It scrapes the internet, aggregates the general consensus of human behavior and discourse, and spits that consensus back out to us. So when the author prompts the AI with this question, they aren't looking for profound divine revelation.
Right.
They are searching for society's operational definition. They're asking, based on the collective data of humanity, what does the world practically believe this faith is all about?
And the AI's answer is remarkably comprehensive, but it is clinical. It doesn't just offer a one-sentence dictionary definition. It actually categorizes the identity into 4 distinct buckets.
4 very specific buckets.
Right. So first, it identifies baseline religious affiliation, essentially. Does this person follow the teachings of the Quran? Then it moves into a taxonomy of core beliefs. It lists the 6 articles of faith,
which include belief in one God, angels, holy books, prophets, the day of judgment, and divine decree.
Exactly. And then it moves to the third bucket, which is visible practices. It highlights the 5 pillars of Islam.
So that's the declaration of faith, the 5 daily prayers, mandatory charity, fasting during Ramadan, and making the Hajj pilgrimage.
Yep. And finally, the 4th bucket focuses on cultural and ethical aspects, noting things like halal dietary restrictions, specific dress codes, and broadly mentioning that the ethical framework values justice and compassion.
That reads exactly like the opening chapter of a comparative religion textbook.
It really does.
It is highly accurate data, but it's purely categorical. On a surface level, A reader might look at that output and consider it a perfectly structured, comprehensive definition.
As it covered all the bases, right?
Yeah, it covers the theology, the required rituals, the cultural markers.
But the author looks at this perfectly structured AI answer and has this massive realization. The author points out that there is absolutely no mention in the AI's core definition about the pursuit of truth. Right. There is no mention of righteousness. There is no mention of kindness as the primary overarching goal of the believer. The AI meticulously lists the mechanical functions, but completely omits what the author argues is the actual foundational essence of what God is asking believers to embody.
And the critique the author is leveling here is not directed at the algorithm, right? It's directed at humanity.
Oh, 100%.
If we go back to the premise that the AI is merely a mirror reflecting majority data, the absence of truth, righteousness, and kindness is deeply concerning.
Because it means we aren't prioritizing it.
Exactly. If those concepts aren't highlighted as the defining essence of the identity, it implies that society's data doesn't prioritize them. The algorithm's data shows people endlessly debating rituals, dietary laws, daily checklists.
Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy. Think about it like an AI trying to define what a musician is based purely on internet data.
Okay, I like this.
Imagine the AI says, a musician is a human who owns a stringed instrument, sits in a designated chair for exactly 60 minutes a day, moves their fingers in specific Phrygian scale patterns, and purchases a specific brand of nylon strings.
Well, technically, those are all observable actions a musician takes.
Right, but it completely misses the fact that the entire point of owning the instrument and practicing the scales is to produce beautiful music.
Yes, the scales are just the structural mechanics designed to facilitate the art.
Exactly. The music is the essence. The author looks at the data reflecting humanity's religious identity and realizes we have defined ourselves entirely by the scales.
We've lost the music.
We are rigorously practicing the scales of faith, but we have completely forgotten how to actually make the music of truth and kindness.
And, if society views identity through that lens of measurable mechanics, if faith is just a checklist of rituals to be completed, what does that do to the human psyche over time?
It can't be good.
It isn't. Focusing purely on visible mechanics is not a harmless misunderstanding. It triggers a profound psychological shift in how a person views their place in the universe.
Which brings us to the author's next major argument, exploring the psychological consequences of this checklist mentality. Because, if you view your spirituality as a series of physical and cultural tasks, you have successfully executed.
Like you prayed the requisite number of times, you fasted for the required days.
Right, you adhered to the strict dress code. It fundamentally alters your relationship with the concept of grace.
Psychologists actually often refer to a variation of this as moral licensing.
Moral licensing.
Yeah. When a human being completes a rigorous, structured task, the brain creates a subconscious ledger. You feel you have earned moral credit.
Ah, okay.
In a spiritual context, when faith is reduced to a difficult checklist, completing it ceases to be a transformative journey and it just becomes a transaction. Right. And when you check all the boxes on a demanding list, the natural emotional response is a sense of achievement. But achievement, when applied to divine grace, very quickly mutates into a sense of entitlement.
And the author actually turns to ancient scripture to diagnose this specific entitlement. They point to a chapter in the Quran, Sura Fussilat, specifically verse 41.50.
And this verse provides a chillingly accurate portrait of human nature.
It really does. It describes a person who goes through a period of adversity and hardship, and eventually God grants them a taste of mercy. Their situation improves.
But instead of this relief generating deep humility, the person's immediate visceral reaction is to claim, this is my due.
This is my due, like they earned it.
Exactly. The psychology of this is my due is the ultimate expression of transactional entitlement.
And the verse goes on to describe the person saying that they don't even believe the final hour is ever going to come, and asserting that even if they are returned to their Lord, they will surely be rewarded well.
Yeah, the author applies this ancient critique directly to the modern believer's mentality. We are provided with the framework for living. We receive blessings. And instead of viewing those things as profound, unearned gifts,
we look at our completed checklist of rituals and conclude that we are inherently owed these blessings.
It is a tragic irony, honestly. The original design behind fasting, praying, and physical rituals is to generate physical and spiritual humility.
Right, to keep you grounded.
Exactly. They are intended to remind the practitioner of their fragility and smallness in the grand scheme of existence. But when those practices are stripped of their essence and treated as a transactional checklist, they achieve the exact opposite result.
They manufacture arrogance.
Yes, the individual begins to view themselves as the perfect practitioner, viewing divine mercy not as a fragile gift, but as rightful compensation for their excellent performance.
And the author provides a very pointed modern example of how this arrogance manifests. There's a quote in the source material where the author mimics this entitled mindset, writing, "I have a PhD in Quran and theology, and so everyone should follow me."
Right, the weaponization of academic credentials in a spiritual context.
But, okay, let me push back on this author for a second, though.
Sure.
If someone spends, like, 10 or 15 years of their life engaged in the grueling, rigorous academic study of a complex religious text, if they earn a PhD, they master the original languages, they understand the historical context better than anyone else in the room, shouldn't they be the ones we follow?
I see what you're saying.
Right. Isn't it just logical to defer to the resident expert? Why is the author framing this as an arrogant failure rather than just a statement of factual competence?
Well, that is the core friction between structural knowledge and spiritual wisdom. The author isn't claiming that the academic knowledge is fake. They are arguing that the knowledge has been decoupled from its intended purpose.
Decoupled.
Well, memorizing the entire text and mastering the theology maps perfectly back to the AI's data points of core beliefs and religious affiliation. But if spending a decade studying a text about divine majesty doesn't fundamentally humble you, if it doesn't drastically increase your kindness and righteousness, then the PhD is just another performative box you checked.
Wow. Okay.
The academic pursuit just becomes a tool to elevate your social status and demand obedience from others, rather than a method to better embody the essence of the faith.
It goes right back to the hospital analogy.
Exactly.
The PhD is the ultimate pristine white doctor's coat. It commands immediate respect from the room. But if you are using the coat solely to demand that everyone acknowledge your authority, you aren't actually healing any patients.
Precisely. And the author is very blunt about where this leads on a societal level. They state, honestly, if you ask me, we are in a very bad situation ourselves.
Because when structural arrogance takes root, it naturally leads to a deeply broken, highly utilitarian relationship with the divine.
Yeah, I mean, if you operate on a psychological ledger where you genuinely believe God owes you a comfortable life because you checked all the boxes and hold the right credentials, your entire worldview is predicated on a clean transaction.
You put the coins of ritual in, and the product of a blessed life is supposed to drop into the tray.
Right. But if that is your underlying assumption, what happens when the product doesn't drop? What happens when you experience sudden, unearned suffering?
You panic.
Exactly. If you think you've purchased an easy life through your adherence to the mechanics, sudden adversity shatters your worldview.
And to explain how people react to this, the author brings in the very next verse in the text, Sura Fussilat, verse 41.51. This verse basically paints a portrait of the ultimate fair-weather believer.
It highlights perfectly how a transactional mindset copes with sudden adversity.
The verse states, "When we grant a blessing to a man, he turns away and draws aside. But when any evil touches him, he is full of endless prayers."
So when the entitlement ledger is being fed and life is comfortable, the divine is completely ignored.
Right. The believer physically and spiritually draws aside.
But the absolute second that the system breaks down and evil or adversity touches them, they suddenly unleash a barrage of endless prayers.
Because they need a fix.
Yeah, the relationship described here is entirely devoid of organic connection. It is not a continuous state of spiritual being. It's a utility.
Like a service you subscribe to.
Yes. Think about the emotional toll of a deeply utilitarian human friendship. We all know that specific type of fair-weather friend.
Oh, for sure.
They vanish completely when your life is going well, but the second they face an eviction notice or their car breaks down or they go through a terrible breakup, suddenly they're calling you 6 times a day.
And you eventually realize they don't value your presence, they only value what you can fix for them.
Exactly.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. And the author gives a uniquely modern example of this exact phenomenon playing out on a massive scale. They point out how many people treat religious pilgrimage today.
The Umrah example.
Right. The author writes, "When we get some problems, we run to do Umrah." For you listening, Umrah is a pilgrimage to Mecca that can be undertaken at any time of the year, distinct from the mandatory Hajj. It is meant to be a profound spiritual recalibration.
But the author is criticizing how it has been commodified into a spiritual emergency room.
Right.
What's fascinating here is that it's become a reactive measure, rather than a proactive state of being.
A business venture is failing, a marriage is collapsing, a health crisis hits. The immediate reaction is to book a flight to Mecca, perform the physical rituals, and expect God to fix the external problem.
And the author follows this observation with a devastating critique. Otherwise, we don't think about God.
Ouch!
Yeah. But we can understand why human beings revert to this behavior, right? When we feel a terrifying lack of control over our circumstances, we look for a tangible lever to pull.
Ritual provides that illusion of control.
Exactly. But the author's critique is that modern faith has been completely stripped of its everyday, continuous ethical demands.
Because if you remember, the AI noted that the religious framework is supposed to provide a comprehensive code for daily living.
Right. Justice in your business dealings, compassion in your home, charity in your community.
But society's data shows that people have abandoned the quiet, difficult, daily effort of internal change. Instead, they utilize grand gestures and endless prayers purely as transactional levers to escape personal pain.
And because that relationship is entirely utilitarian, believers never actually consult the text for long-term structural changes to their lives.
Which makes sense. If you only talk to the divine when your life is actively on fire and you are only looking for a quick extinguisher, you completely ignore the permanent foundational solutions that are sitting right in front of you.
Which transitions perfectly into the final phase of the author's argument.
Right. Society is so trapped in this reactive, emergency hotline mindset that humanity is actively ignoring the very blueprint it claims to revere.
And this is where the sheer tragedy of the situation really comes into focus for the author. The diagnostic manual for how to permanently fix these underlying human problems exists, but nobody is willing to do the hard work of reading it.
Yeah. The author cites the next consecutive verse, Sura Fussilat 41.52. The verse poses a direct, challenging question. Have you considered, if this Quran is really from God and you still reject it, then who could be more astray than someone who has drifted far away from the truth?
This is a heavy question.
It is. The author expresses intense frustration with how modern society attempts to solve its crises. They note that the world is full of people constantly generating new ideas, pitching novel solutions, trying to invent complex ways out of our societal messes. But the author asks, is there anyone who thinks what God is telling us to do?
The psychological barrier here is significant. Reading and internalizing the original text requires internal change.
It requires work.
Exactly. It demands that you alter your ego, modify your daily habits, dismantle your entitled worldview. Inventing a new political philosophy or downloading the latest self-help app allows you to externalize the problem.
Right. It's like having the exact architectural blueprint to build a sturdy, weatherproof house sitting wide open on your kitchen table. But because your roof keeps caving in and you are panicking, instead of reading the blueprint to see where the structural flaw is, you are running frantically around the neighborhood asking random strangers for duct tape and glue.
I love that analogy. You possess the blueprint.
Yes, but because you view the blueprint merely as a cultural prop to prove your identity, rather than a functional, demanding guide for living, your house continues to collapse.
And this profound disconnect brings us to the author's ultimate warning, utilizing the final piece of scripture in their sequence.
Sura Fussilat, verse 41.53.
Yes. The text states, "We shall show them our signs in the universe and within themselves, until it becomes clear to them that this is the truth."
Signs in the universe and within themselves.
If we connect this to the broader sociological picture the author has painted, this verse isn't necessarily talking about, like, supernatural abstract miracles appearing in the sky.
Right, it's more grounded.
It is talking about the brutal reality of causality. It is about the natural, inescapable consequences of our collective actions.
Okay, I follow.
The author is suggesting that when an entire society abandons truth, righteousness, and kindness, when a culture replaces substantive morality with superficial checklists, performative academic credentials, and transactional entitlement, the universe itself will reflect that decay.
Wow.
The internal psychological emptiness and the external societal chaos are the literal signs.
And the author makes this connection explicitly clear. They write, all the problems that are happening to us are signs from God that we are doing wrong, absolutely wrong things. Still, we don't learn.
Still, we don't learn.
Think about the weight of that perspective for a second. The author believes the chaotic, messy, painful problems dominating the globe right now are not just random historical bad luck. They are literal, data points, causal signs, that humanity is operating on a fundamentally broken code.
We are executing the wrong instructions.
And yet, we stubbornly refuse to look at the original manual to debug the system. And for you listening, how often does that exact pattern play out in our individual lives?
Oh, constantly.
We constantly seek out the most complex, cutting-edge solutions to our modern anxiety, our broken relationships, our lack of purpose, while the fundamental, ancient instructions regarding basic humility, continuous kindness, and rigorous truth might be sitting right on a bookshelf in our living room, just gathering dust.
Because humanity consistently prefers the comfortable complexity of our invented workarounds to the simple, demanding reality of the original truth.
Well said. Let's take a step back and look at the trajectory of the arguments we have explored today.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. We started with a hypermodern AI acting as a mirror, giving us a clinical, categorized definition of a religious identity, a definition that perfectly captured the observable mechanics of practice, but entirely missed the underlying soul.
Right. And from that baseline, the author utilized scripture to demonstrate the psychological fallout of that mechanical mindset. We explored how treating faith as a difficult checklist inevitably breeds moral licensing and spiritual arrogance.
Personified by the academic who weaponizes their knowledge to demand obedience rather than cultivate wisdom.
Exactly.
And that sense of entitlement then creates the fair-weather believer. The utilitarian friend who ignores the divine when the ledger is balanced but frantically dials the emergency hotline the absolute second adversity strikes, using sacred pilgrimages merely as reactive levers to escape pain.
And finally, we arrived at a society experiencing the chaotic, causal consequences of these abandoned values, the signs in the universe, yet remaining completely blind to the root cause, refusing to consult the very blueprint they claim gives them their identity.
It is a devastatingly sharp critique of how easily the daily performance of an identity can completely overwrite the actual meaning of that identity. As we wrap up this deep dive into the source material, I'm going to hand it over for one final thought to carry with you.
Yeah, so the author established a vital premise at the very beginning of their essay. Artificial intelligence is nothing but a cold reflection of the observable data it aggregates.
Right.
It only knows what it can objectively measure. Consider the implications of that for your own life. If an algorithm were to scrape the raw data of your daily existence right now, monitoring your quiet actions,
Yeah.
your instantaneous reactions, your private behaviors, and your public displays, to define your core identity, what would it output?
That's a terrifying question.
It is. Would the AI define you strictly by the superficial checklist you manage to complete every day, by the uniforms you put on, or the titles and credentials you loudly claim? Or would the algorithm actually find enough raw, undeniable data to define you by the truth, the kindness, and the righteousness you genuinely embody when absolutely no one is asking for your credentials?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We respect your time and your curiosity, and we highly encourage you to take a hard look at the data you are feeding the universe today. We will see you next time.